Hello, everyone. This is my latest video on regarding issues in economics, and it's entitled "The Not Too Dismal Science of Economics." And what I want to talk about today is some issues that related to the first video that I put on about AI, artificial intelligence. The issue that arises with artificial intelligence is a general issue related to automation. Historically, the economics profession has been of the mind that what happens when you automate former labor-intensive production processes, that the labor is freed up to do other things. In other words, that's the creation of new goods and services, and just generally expanding the range and types of goods available. But some people are concerned that with the speed of automation, and AI will play a role here, might play a role here, that there may be somewhat severe adjustment that might take place. In other words, the new businesses or the new services or goods that might be created might take a while to come online. And some people are so pessimistic that, in some sense, there may be a reduction in employment because these new production or these new goods are being produced with very little labor. So it's kind of a labor surplus fear that a number of people have in the economy. Just to put this sort of in perspective, the economy has always been sort of viewed in what's called the circular flow idea. And this is from Richard Cantillon from the 18th century, who developed this idea. And what he did was he argued that there are primarily two major groups in an economy. And he focused largely on these two. Government is the third, but the two that he focused on were households and businesses. And what he pointed out was that there is a relationship between what happens in businesses and what happens in households. And what households do is they supply labor to businesses in exchange for payments. Usually it's a wage or a salary. So you have that flow. It's between the labor services and the payment for those labor services. But you also have that the firms with the labor produce goods and services which are purchased by the households. So you can see that there is this simultaneity of desires and actions which takes place. Now, the issue that the pessimists have regarding automation and AI is that one of those linkages or one of those relationships will be reduced. For example, the households reducing the labor being supplied to firms because the firms are now more capital intensive, so they don't need labor as much. Now, the problem that people point to is that if you're not supplying labor to the firms, how are households going to get the incomes to purchase the goods and services from the firms? In other words, there might be a contraction in what you might think of as the circular flow. So this is to say, this is the primary fear of people with automation, is that somehow this symbiotic relationship is going to be upset in some ways. And a number of people have advocated certain potential policies to deal with this. Obviously, what is most well known is that households will be getting some of the returns, or think of the firm as earning profits in some sense. And then if you bring in the government kind of plays the third role. And the government's always been in this circular flow arrangement. And essentially what the government does is it takes incomes from the some households and some businesses, and then replaces or in some ways will provide them both to households and services. So the governments are a part of that kind of circular flow. So the idea here is that the governments would basically use proceeds or tax proceeds from businesses to then transfer to households who will then have the income by which they can purchase those goods and services. In some sense, that income would be in lieu of the labor services that are provided. So that's, in the sense, if you want to think about what is the fundamental underpinning of a guaranteed annual income, is that this fear of automation. Now, as an economist, in general, we do focus on incomes and sort of standard of living, right? In terms of what is the basket of goods and services that people can purchase. However, there is a fundamental change when labor is now earning. It seems that you might have to change the name of labor to kind of income recipient. Changing labor supplied or changing the income that you get from supplying labor to direct transfers from the government is a fundamental change in how society operates. And effectively, what it would do would be to turn a large fraction of the economy into kind of a welfare state. In other words, if you're not supplying labor, you're not getting up to go to work in the morning, but you're getting regular checks from the government, then that's a fundamental change in society. Now, economists generally think of labor supply in two ways. One is obviously if you supply labor, you get income. But with your available time, you're always battling between or choosing between supplying labor and what we call leisure, and is not working. So in a sense, what you'd be doing with a guaranteed annual income would be giving people lots of leisure time. And then the question would be, well, what's going to happen, or what are people going to use that leisure time for? Now, the optimists under guaranteed annual income think that this is going to be kind of a revolutionary period where the arts will flourish and people will be doing things that they've always wanted to do, but since they've been at work, they haven't been able to do it. So that's kind of the optimists. The pessimists are saying that supplying labor or a job is more than just the income that you get. It is a sort of a bundle of characteristics. When you work, what do you get? You get interaction between other people, you get an identity, you get other things which may not be reflected in your income, but you are part of society. So a good example is what happened in COVID, right? When COVID was on, what did you have? You had a bunch of people who couldn't go to work because they were shuttered in. And so what was the effect? Well, in many ways, not great. For some people, they were actually quite content to be at home, but other people found the social isolation quite significant. Now, it wouldn't be exact parallel because COVID actually shuttered lots of businesses. But what the COVID period did was removed a lot of interaction of workers from other workers in firms. So, apart from these two poles, in general, whenever automation has come in, or whenever things look like technological change was occurring, the pessimists always argued that this is going to be the end of work and there would be no other jobs for people to have. In other words, kind of a finite job idea. But history has shown that whenever automation comes in, other jobs replace it. In other words, people then do jobs which now become more valuable because people now are uh, interested in perhaps other goods and services. But if you were to be realistic in some sense, there will be an adjustment process. But I think the key thing that people have to be concerned about is whether this change in how people receive incomes, either through work or through transfers, is going to have a fundamental change in society. And in general, the people who have been concerned about the automation in the past have been what are called Luddites, and they were a group who were actually involved in smashing machines. So certain processes couldn't be automated. Now you see this even with the longshoremen's union strike going on, that's the big issue is automation. So I think technological change always brings disruptions. And whether AI is going to be this massive transformation of occupations is still a little bit up in the air. Some things you can automate fairly easily, but other things, particularly the service sector, is quite hard to automate. For example, healthcare, education, perhaps you can automate some of it, but we had options to automate education, right? Massive online courses, or MOOCs they were called, haven't been tremendously successful. In other words, that is an example where you completely replace an instructor with basically capital, which would be lectures that were already provided and so on. So the history has been that even areas which you think would be very ripe for complete sort of automation or takeover have missed out on elements of what's being delivered, which are valuable in terms of the human dimension to it. So hope you found these comments interesting. And if you are interested in this top, give it a like. And if you're interested as well, you can follow the series. So I'm Philip Soren, Professor of Economics at the University of Winnipeg, and this is another in my series on the not too dismal science of economics. So bye for now.